Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Colonel Michael McMahon. Tomorrow marks Colonel McMahon's last day in uniform, retiring after 37 years of combined military service of Australia and the United Kingdom. In October 2015, Colonel McMahon helped pull survivors from a helicopter crash in Kabul. For this action, His Excellency Sir Peter Cosgrove awarded him the Bravery Medal. Colonel McMahon, we thank you and your family for your service. Today marks the 74th anniversary of the sinking of the second third Australian hospital ship Centaur by a Japanese submarine on the 14th of May 1943. The Centaur was a merchant navy vessel. 332 people were on board, including the civilian crew and medical personnel. Only 64 would survive. The following afternoon, an American destroyer, USS Mugford, was able to assist in recovering survivors. The loss of the Centaur deeply shocked Australia, and for many Australians, she became a symbol of the determination to win the war. We warmly welcome the family and friends of the Centaur victims. We are honoured to acknowledge Acting Deputy Chief of Mission, Mr. Michael Heath, representing the US Ambassador, Mr. Peter Everly, on behalf of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch, and Mr. Richard Jones, President of the Centaur Association, representatives of the Naval Association of Australia. We warmly welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony around Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Alan Thomas Adams, who was killed on the 14th of May 1943 when the Australian hospital ship Centaur was sunk by a Japanese submarine during the Second World War. Alan Adams was born in St Peter's in Sydney on the 4th of April 1913 to Albert and Florence Adams. He grew up and attended school in Newtown. By the outbreak of the Second World War, he was working as a storeman and packer and still living with his parents. Adams enlisted in the militia on the 12th of May 1941, becoming a driver with the Army Service Corps, and was attached to the 2nd Division Supply Column. He was mobilised for full-time service with the Australian Imperial Force on the 28th of November 1941. Initially, full-time service did not agree with Adams, and he went absent without leave on several occasions, but he had settled by early February 1942. Later that month, Adams was sent to Darwin, where he was attached as a driver to the 2nd 12th Field Ambulance. At this time, Adams's new unit had begun rebuilding after losing 90 of its members killed or captured by the Japanese following the taking of Ambon and Timor. Adams arrived in Darwin only a few weeks after the city and the area had been heavily damaged following Japanese air raids. Further attacks followed, but Adams would have seen a strengthening of the defences as Australian, American, British and Dutch forces were committed to the area. The 2nd 12th Field Ambulance spent the remainder of 1942 in the Darwin area, rebuilding and continuing to support the 23rd Brigade. The unit was relieved by the 2nd 13th Field Ambulance in January 1943 and was posted to the Wollongong area. In May, the 2nd 12th Field Ambulance was making ready to deploy to Port Moresby and was taken to Sydney, where on the 11th of May, the men embarked upon the hospital ship Centaur. Built in the early 1920s on the River Clyde in Scotland as a merchant vessel, in early 1943, Centaur was converted to a hospital ship. It had a fully equipped operating theatre and dental surgery and could carry 252 patients. Centaur was also clearly marked as a hospital ship. Around its freshly painted white hull, a wide green band ran, broken in several places by large red crosses. At night, the vessel was brilliantly illuminated by powerful spotlights. Centaur only completed 2 voyages with patients before beginning its ill-fated 3rd and final voyage. In the early afternoon of the 12th of May, the hospital ship steamed from Sydney to Cairns. Shortly after 4 a.m. on the 14th, while most people on board were asleep, a torpedo fired by a Japanese submarine struck Centaur's port side, hitting the oil fuel tank, which ignited a massive explosion. The bridge superstructure collapsed and the funnel crashed onto the deck. Everything was covered with burning oil and a fire quickly roared across the vessel. Water rushed in through the gaping hole in her side. And many of those on board who had survived the explosion and the fire were trapped as the ship started to go down, bow first, and then broke in two. In just 3 minutes, Centaur was gone. Of the 332 people on board, only 64 survived. And these survivors were at sea for a day and a half before they were rescued. Adams, aged 30, was among the dead. Of the 200 men of the 2nd 12th Field Ambulance, only 14 survived. The unit had been all but annihilated for a second time. However, the 2nd 12th Field Ambulance was rebuilt for a third time and went on to serve in Borneo in 1945. Here, the men were involved in the care and evacuation of prisoners of war and internees at Kuching. Adams's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among some 40,000 Australians who died during the Second World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Alan Thomas Adams, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and good evening.